Okay, so today we're diving deep into advertising procurement. And, it might not sound like the most exciting thing in the world, but trust me, this is where creativity meets those bottom line numbers. And getting it right is mission critical for any business that wants their message to actually land. We've got a whole stack of articles here on best practices. So let's see if we can pull out some of those golden nuggets, shall we?
Absolutely. And I think what's really fascinating about this field is that it really is this balance of art and science.
Yeah.
You've got the creative vision, but then you also have to have this really strong understanding of the financial realities.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this first article kind of jumps right into that tension, that whole idea that marketing and procurement, they need to be more than just like roommates forced to share a kitchen. They use this analogy of a global beverage company launching a new drink. Marketing wants a Super Bowl ad. Procurement's worried about,
Yeah.
what's the cost per sip? How do you avoid that turning into like all-out war?
Well, I think what this article really highlights is that it's about aligning goals and not just tasks. So both teams ultimately want the campaign to succeed,
All right.
but they're coming at it from these very different perspectives. It's almost like marketing is focused on painting a masterpiece, and procurement is making sure that they have the right canvas and the right brushes, and that they're not going bankrupt in the process.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good analogy. But how do you actually get them to work together? I mean, sometimes it feels like they're speaking totally different languages.
Well, I think one of the keys is getting them involved early on in the process.
Yeah.
So instead of procurement just being the no department at the very end,
Yeah.
they're actually involved in that brainstorming phase. So you can imagine procurement actually helping marketing understand emerging platforms or negotiate better deals with media companies.
Yeah, that's a huge shift. It's almost like they become allies in figuring out how to get the most creative bang for their buck.
Exactly. And I think this leads really nicely to our next article, which is all about
Mm-hmm.
the role of data in advertising procurement. So,
Yeah.
remember those old school campaigns where it was just like, spray and pray, hope something hits?
Yeah.
Those days are over. This article talks about how data can be used to analyze
Yeah.
not just your own company's past wins and fails, but also,
Mm-hmm.
looking at what's worked for others in your industry.
So it's like having a cheat sheet, but
Yeah,
one that's based on, actual results, not just gut feelings.
exactly. But it goes even deeper than that. Imagine being able to predict which customers are most likely to buy your product
Mm-hmm.
based on their online behavior, what they've clicked on,
Yeah.
how long they've lingered on certain web pages. That's the kind of granular detail that data-driven procurement can unlock.
Whoa. Okay. That's a little creepy, but also incredibly powerful. I mean, so you're not just targeting demographics anymore. You're targeting like individual behaviors. Exactly. And this can impact everything from what platforms you advertise on to what type of messaging you use. So, for example, if you're targeting Gen Z, maybe a TikTok influencer campaign is going to be way more effective than a traditional TV ad. And data can help you figure that out.
So it's not just about numbers, it's about understanding like how people actually behave, what
Yeah.
makes them tick.
Precisely. And this leads us to our next article, which focuses on supplier relationships. And it's, it's not enough to just find the cheapest vendor. You need to build relationships that are based on trust and mutual understanding.
Yeah, and they have this really fascinating anecdote about a sports brand that's had the same advertising agency for like over a decade. They've been through multiple campaigns, product launches, even some controversies together. It's like a marriage, but hopefully with fewer arguments. Yeah. And what's interesting is the article emphasizes that, these strong relationships lead to better communication, quicker turnarounds, and a willingness to kind of innovate together. So
Yeah.
it's not just about following a contract. It's about having a partner who's invested in your success.
Oh, yeah. Like having a co-pilot who knows your brand inside and out
Yeah,
and can kind of help you navigate that ever-changing advertising landscape.
exactly. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of advertising procurement. And it's one that's often overlooked, but it can be incredibly important. And that's legal compliance.
Yeah. This isn't the sexiest topic, I know.
Yeah.
But it's one that can really sink a campaign faster than a bad jingle. I mean, we've all seen those ads that land a company in hot water. Whether it's misleading claims or just plain bad taste, it can do some serious damage to a brand's reputation.
Yeah, and the article actually highlights this case study of a multinational conglomerate that got into some serious trouble for not complying with regulations in certain markets.
Yeah.
They kind of had this one-size-fits-all approach, and it backfired big time. They had to pull entire campaigns and face fines, all because they didn't do their legal due diligence up front.
Yikes. So it's not just about being creative, it's about being smart
Yeah.
and making sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's, legally speaking.
Exactly. And that's especially important in today's globalized world,
Yeah.
right? Because different countries have different regulations, and what's acceptable in one market might be completely off limits in another.
Yeah.
So you need to have that global perspective
Yeah.
and be aware of all those nuances.
Yeah. It's like having to learn a whole new set of rules for every game you play.
Yeah, it can be
That
challenging.
sounds exhausting.
It can be, but it's essential.
Oh.
And you need to build compliance into your processes
Mm.
from the very beginning. It's not something you can just tack on as an afterthought at the end.
All right, so we've covered collaboration, data supplier relationships, and legal compliance. That's a lot to digest. But there's one more ingredient in this secret sauce of advertising procurement, right?
You got it. Yeah, and it's the one that keeps things exciting. Innovation and adaptability. This is where the rubber meets the road in today's fast-paced world.
All right, welcome back. So we've been kind of laying the groundwork here,
Yeah.
talking about all the key elements of advertising procurement. But I want to talk about actually putting these principles into practice. Like, how do companies actually leverage data to make a real difference?
Yeah. It's one thing to say data is king, but how do you actually use it to make smarter decisions?
Yeah.
Not just drown in spreadsheets.
Right, exactly.
Well, one way to think about it is data is a roadmap, not just a rearview mirror. So it's not just about analyzing past campaigns. It's about using data to predict future trends and behavior. Imagine being able to anticipate shifts in consumer preferences or spot emerging platforms before your competitors do.
Right.
That's where the real magic happens.
Okay, so it's like you're using data to predict the next big wave in surfing, not just riding the ones that have already passed. How do companies actually do that?
Well, one powerful tool is predictive analytics. Think about companies like Netflix or Spotify. They use algorithms to suggest content based on your past viewing or listening habits. That same principle can be applied to advertising. By analyzing customer data, you can predict what types of ads they're most likely to respond to, even what time of day they're most likely to be receptive.
Whoa, okay, so
Yeah.
instead of just blasting out the same message to everyone, you're serving up these personalized ads that are tailored to individual preferences. It's like having a personal shopper for your advertising.
Exactly. And it can be incredibly effective. And there are even platforms out there that allow you to automate this process using real-time data to bid on ad space and target your audience with pinpoint accuracy. It's called programmatic advertising. And it's really changing the game.
Okay, hold on. Programmatic advertising. Break that down for me a little bit.
So imagine an auction happening in milliseconds. Every time someone loads a web page, advertisers are bidding on the opportunity to show their ad to that specific person based on their data profile. The platform analyzes thousands of data points, like demographics, browsing history, even location, and then decides which ad is most likely to resonate with that individual.
That's wild. It's like a super sophisticated matchmaking service, but for ads. No wonder it's so effective.
Right. But it's not just about technology. Remember, we talked about the importance of building those strong supplier relationships. Well, that's especially crucial in this data-driven world.
So you're saying that even with all this fancy technology, you still need that good old-fashioned human connection.
Absolutely. You need to find partners who not only understand data, but who also share your values and are truly invested in your success. Think of it, you're trusting them with your customer data, your brand reputation, your budget. That requires a high level of trust.
That makes sense. You don't want to just hand over the keys to the kingdom to just anyone. So how do you find those trustworthy partners? What are some red flags to watch out for?
One big red flag is a supplier who's all about the hard sell. And they don't really take the time to understand your specific needs and goals. They're just trying to push their own agenda, not find the best solution for you.
So it's like going to a doctor who prescribes the same medicine for every patient without even bothering to diagnose the problem.
Exactly. You want a partner who asks questions, who challenges your assumptions, who helps you think outside the box. They should be more interested in building a long-term relationship than just closing a deal.
So it's about finding someone who's more of a collaborator than just a vendor, someone who's willing to really roll up their sleeves and work alongside you to achieve your goals.
That's the ideal scenario, and it's worth taking the time to find those partners because the benefits can be huge. You'll have better communication, smoother workflows, and a shared sense of ownership over the success of your campaigns.
Okay, so we've got data, we've got relationships. Now let's talk about the legal side of things. This can feel like a minefield sometimes, especially with regulations constantly changing.
It's true, the legal landscape can be daunting, but there are ways to simplify it. One key is to think proactively, not reactively. Don't wait for a problem to arise before you start thinking about compliance.
Okay, so it's about being prepared, not paranoid.
Mhm.
But where do you even begin? I mean, do you need a law degree just to launch an ad campaign these days?
You don't need a law degree, but you do need a solid understanding of the basic principles
Hmm.
and a good process in place. So first, identify the key regulations that apply to your industry and your target markets. Are you dealing with data privacy, children's advertising financial products? Each area has its own specific set of rules.
Okay, so you got to know the rules of the game.
Yeah.
But how do you actually make sure you're playing by them?
Well, one way is to build compliance into your workflow, like a series of checks and balances. For example, have a checklist for every campaign that covers key legal points. Are your claims substantiated? Are your disclosures clear and conspicuous? Have you obtained the necessary permissions and licenses?
Okay, so it's like having a safety net to catch any potential issues before they turn into like major problems. Sounds a little tedious, but I guess it's better than ending up in court.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be a burden. There are tools and resources available to help you streamline the process. You can also consult with legal experts
Yeah.
to get guidance on specific issues.
So you don't have to go it alone. It's about finding the right expertise and
Yeah.
building a system that works for you.
Exactly. And remember, compliance isn't just about avoiding legal trouble. It's about building trust with your audience. When people see that you're operating ethically and responsibly, they're more likely to engage with your brand and become loyal customers.
All right, so we've got data, we've got relationships, we've got compliance, but we got to talk about the fun stuff. Innovation. This is where things get really interesting. How can companies stay ahead of the curve in a world that's constantly changing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think the answer lies in embracing a culture of experimentation and adaptability. You can't be afraid to try new things, to push the boundaries, to even fail sometimes.
So it's like being a scientist in a lab, constantly testing hypotheses and seeing what works. But
Yeah.
how do you create that kind of culture within a company, especially a large one? Those aren't exactly known for being nimble and quick on their feet.
It starts with leadership. Leaders need to create a safe space for experimentation, where people aren't afraid to take risks, and where failure is seen as a learning opportunity, not a career killer.
So it's about shifting the mindset from play it safe to let's see what happens.
Exactly. And it's not just about big sweeping changes. Sometimes the smallest tweaks can have a huge impact. Maybe you experiment with a new ad format, or you try a different way of targeting your audience. The key is to constantly be iterating and improving.
So embracing a mindset of continuous improvement, never settle for good enough, because there's always room to get better.
That's the spirit. And remember, innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. You need to stay connected to what's happening in the wider world, whether it's new technologies, emerging platforms, or shifts in consumer behavior.
So being curious, staying informed, and
Yeah.
always asking yourself what's next.
Exactly. And sometimes the best way to predict the future is to create it yourself.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of high-level concepts, but let's get down to brass tacks here. Can you share some concrete examples
Yeah.
of how these principles have been applied in real-world scenarios?
Absolutely. I've got some fascinating case studies that really illustrate the power of data relationships and innovation in action. Let's take a look at how some companies are using these principles to achieve some remarkable results.
Welcome back. I'm excited to hear about those real-world examples because sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around it until you see it in action.
Yeah, well, I've got a case study that really showcases the power of data-driven decision-making. It involves this global retail giant, and they were really struggling to connect with their target audience. Their campaigns were kind of all over the place, and they just weren't seeing the return on investment that they were hoping for.
So they were basically just throwing darts blindfolded.
Pretty much. They had tons of data, but they weren't using it strategically. Then they brought in a team of data analytics experts, and these guys helped them revamp their whole approach.
Okay, so what did these data wizards do differently?
The key was segmentation. They realized that they couldn't treat all their customers the same by analyzing their data. They were able to divide that massive customer base into smaller, more defined groups based on shared characteristics and preferences. And this allowed them to create, highly targeted campaigns that spoke directly to each segment's needs and desires.
So instead of that one-size-fits-all messaging, they were tailoring their ads to specific groups of people.
Exactly. It's like having a personal stylist for your advertising.
Yeah.
And they even started using programmatic advertising, which allow them to automate the process of bidding on ad space
Mm.
and targeting their ads in real time based on user data.
Okay, hold on. You're going to have to remind me how that works again
Yeah.
because it's pretty complex.
Right. So think of it as this super fast auction
Mm-hmm.
happening every time someone loads a web page. Advertisers are bidding on the opportunity to show their ad
Mm.
to that specific person based on their data profile. And the platform analyzes thousands of data points like demographics,
Mm.
browsing history, even location.
Yeah.
And then it decides which ad is most likely to resonate.
So they're not just guessing anymore. They're using data to make really informed decisions
Yeah,
about where and when to place their ads.
precisely. And the results were impressive. Their click-through rates skyrocketed, their conversion rates went up, and their overall return on ad spend increased dramatically.
Wow. Data really can be a game changer when it's used strategically. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about supplier relationships. Do you have a case study that shows how powerful those connections can be?
Absolutely. And this one involves this cutting-edge tech startup that was developing a revolutionary new product. They needed a marketing campaign
Yeah.
that would really capture the public's imagination
Yeah.
and generate some buzz. So they decided to partner with this boutique creative agency
Mm.
that was known for its innovative and unconventional approach.
So they went with a smaller, more specialized agency instead of a big established firm?
Exactly. They wanted an agency that was nimble, adaptable, and willing to push the boundaries.
Mm.
And from the very beginning, they made it clear that they wanted a true partnership, not just a transactional relationship.
So it was about finding the right fit, not just the biggest name or the lowest price.
Precisely. They involved the agency in every step of the process,
Huh.
from product development to market research to campaign strategy. They shared their vision, their goals, their challenges,
Yeah.
very openly and honestly.
So it was a very collaborative approach.
Exactly. And the agency really responded in kind. They brought their A game to the table, and they were committed to delivering exceptional results.
Okay, drumroll, please. Was the campaign a success?
It was a smash hit. The campaign generated massive media attention. It created a ton of social media buzz, and the product launch was a huge success. The startup exceeded its sales goals and quickly became a leader in its industry.
That's amazing. It shows that when you have that mutual trust and respect, you can really achieve some incredible things together.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that investing in supplier relationships can pay off big time. But let's not forget about the importance of legal compliance. Do you have a case study that kind of illustrates the dangers of ignoring that?
Oh, I bet you do. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new campaign and forget about all those legal details, but that can be a really costly mistake.
Absolutely. And I have a cautionary tale that really underscores this point. It involves a well-known food and beverage company, and they launched a new product with this big, splashy marketing campaign that made some pretty bold health claims.
I'm sensing this isn't going to end well.
You're right to be apprehensive. They failed to back up those claims with any scientific evidence. And they also neglected to comply with labeling regulations in certain markets. They were so focused on the marketing message that they completely overlooked those legal details.
So they were making promises they couldn't keep and bending the rules in the process.
Exactly. And the consequences were swift and severe. They
Mhm.
faced lawsuits, they had to pull their product from shelves, and their brand reputation took a major hit.
That's a painful and expensive lesson to learn. It really highlights the importance of proactive legal compliance.
Absolutely. It's not enough to just react to problems. You need to anticipate potential issues
Yeah.
and take steps to mitigate them from the very beginning. Legal compliance should be baked into the process from day one.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Data relationships, compliance, innovation. It's clear that advertising procurement is a complex and constantly evolving field.
It certainly is. But by mastering these key principles, companies can navigate the challenges and reap the rewards of effective and efficient advertising campaigns.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I would say embrace adaptability. The advertising world is constantly changing, and those who are willing to learn, evolve, and adapt are the ones who will thrive.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to experiment, challenge assumptions,
Mm.
and push the boundaries. And remember, even with all the data and technology in the world, the human element is still essential. Building strong relationships, understanding the why behind the numbers, and nurturing a culture of creativity and innovation. Those are the timeless qualities that will drive success in the dynamic world of advertising procurement.
That's a great point. It sounds like the future of advertising procurement is all about being agile, data savvy, and relationship focused. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a really insightful conversation.
It's been my pleasure.